Today we'll be talking about the final paragraph, the 20th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār. It's a very short paragraph, but Bhagavan, as usual, packs a lot into it. They're just 4 sentences. In the first sentence, he says, "Nāṉ eṛundāl, sakalam-um, eṛum." That means, literally, if oneself rises or appears, everything rises. What he means when he says if oneself rises, obviously he's talking here about ego, because our real nature doesn't rise or subside, it doesn't appear or disappear, it's ever shining within us as I. What appears and disappears is ego. That is the false awareness. I am this body, I am this person. So if that false awareness, Bhagavan says, that is ego. So if oneself, meaning ego, if oneself rises, everything rises. So all things appear only when we ourselves appear as ego. And then in the second sentence, he says the other side of the same coin, Nāṉ aḍaṅgiṇāl, sakalam-um aḍaṅgum. If oneself subsides, or disappears or ceases, everything subsides, disappears or ceases. What Bhagavan says in these 2 sentences is one of the cornerstones of his teachings. He also expressed the same idea in verse 26 of y-aḍakki-k-koṇḍirundāl, in which he says, naṉmai-y-uṇḍu. That means if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. y-irundālum. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. y-aḍakki-k-koṇḍirundāl. Ego itself is everything. That means ego is the seed from which everything, all phenomena, they appear only from ego. Aḍaṅgiṇāl, y-aḍakki-k-koṇḍirundāl in naḍlai, evvaḷavukkevvaḷavu and all. That means, therefore, investigating what is this, that means what is this ego, is giving up everything. The reason he said that is because in other verses, and another fundamental principle of his teaching is, the ego appears when we attend to anything other than ourselves. When we turn our attention back on ourselves, ego disappears. Ego has no existence of its own. It seems to exist only because it attends to things other than itself. Those things other than itself don't exist independent of it. It projects those things. Just as in a dream, the dream world doesn't exist independent of our perception of it. It's only we project the dream world into our awareness, into our perception, and so it seems to exist. So we perceive it, that is, the projection and the perception are one and the same thing. So it is by projecting and perceiving a world, but we seem to be ego. In other words, when we're not looking at ourselves, we seem to be ego. When we look at ourselves, ego subsides and disappears. And ego, as I said, ego is the false awareness, I am this body, I am this person. Whenever we're dreaming, we're aware of a dream world, and we're aware of ourselves as if we were a person in that dream world, as if there's a dream body, but we experience as ourselves. According to Bhagavan, this waking state, what we take to be a waking state, is actually just another dream. In exactly the same way, we have projected this. First we project the body, and then through the 5 senses of the body, we project the world. But as ego, we always experience ourselves as I am this body. That is a distorted form of the pure self-awareness that we actually are, because pure self-awareness is aware of itself only as I am, or I am I, as Bhagavan sometimes said. It's never aware of itself as I am this or I am that. That is, we cannot be anything other than ourselves. So the body is something that appears and disappears. We exist whether this body appears in waking this body appears, in dream some other body appears. Whether either of these bodies appear or not, we still exist there. We exist in sleep in the absence of any body. So we cannot be any body, but we seem to be in one state and not in other states. What we actually are is just pure awareness. And everything else seems to exist only because we've risen as ego. This is a very, very radical teaching Bhagavan gives us. It's a very simple truth, but it's a truth that for most of us is very difficult to accept. It's very hard for us to accept that this world has no existence apart from our perception of it. Bhagavan says, in sleep there is no world. We agree, oh yes, in sleep I don't see any world, but the world still exists there, is our assumption. But Bhagavan said, no, if you don't see it, it doesn't exist. Because it doesn't exist independent of our, it doesn't exist outside our perception. It's just a mental projection. Just like the dream world doesn't exist except when we are perceiving it, this world doesn't exist except when we're perceiving it. So what Bhagavan says in these two sentences is one of the fundamental principles of his teachings. He says it in other places in Ūrudunapadu. He says, for example, in the 14th verse, he says, if the first person exists, second and third persons exist. He says the same in an earlier paragraph of Who Am I? He says, that's in the 5th paragraph, he says, Maṉattai tāṛndu nenevugu y-aḍakki-k-koṇḍirundāl Nāṉ Ār nenevu. That means of all the thoughts that appear in the mind, the thought called I alone is the first thought. Idu eṛundāl pirahe eņgē nenevugal irukkalām. After this appears, other thoughts appear. And he had said in the previous paragraph that the world is nothing but thoughts. So what he means here by thought is any phenomena. Because according to Bhagavan, all phenomena, they're nothing but mental phenomena. They're nothing but thoughts. And then he says, naṉmai-y-uṇḍu pirahe, that's after the first person appears, muṇilai-padakkai-gal tāṛndu kinjana. Second and third persons appear. The first person means ego, I. The muṇilai-padakkai, the second and third person, means anything other than I, all phenomena. So after the first person appears, second and third persons appear. Taṇmai-indri muṇilai-padakkai-gal irā. Without the first person, second and third persons do not exist. So it's the same principle Bhagavan is expressing in this last paragraph. He also expresses this in the first sentence of verse 7 of Arunachala-ashtakam. He says, Indraham enum nene pira vondrum indru. That means if the aham enum nenevu, the thought called I, if the thought called I does not exist, pira ondrum indru, even one other does not exist. One other there we can take as one other thought or one other thing. It makes no difference because according to Bhagavan, all things, all phenomena are just thoughts. So nothing exists independent of ego. Well, the only thing that exists independent of ego is ourself, our real nature, which is just pure awareness. But other than pure awareness, everything depends for its semi-existence upon the semi-existence of ourself as ego. So this is, by restating this in the final paragraph, Bhagavan is summarizing what is one of the fundamental principles of his teachings. And though this idea is found here and there in old Advaitic literature, it's in a very, it's not expressed so explicitly, like it's implied rather than expressed explicitly in older literature, because the older literature was catering for people of many different levels. Not everyone is ready to accept the Advaita in its purest form. But Bhagavan doesn't hold anything back. He says everything as it is. So he expresses it, this fundamental principle. All other things seem to exist only because we have risen as ego. Then in the third sentence of this paragraph, he said something which is something that we can infer from this principle. That is, if everything appears because we rise as ego, to the extent that we rise as ego, to that extent all troubles ensue. To the extent that we surrender ourselves, to the extent that this ego subsides, to that extent it is good, he says here. That is what he says in this sentence is, evvaḷavukkevvaḷavu tāṛndu naḍakkiṛōmō, aḍaṅgiṉāl naṉmai-y-uṇḍu. That means to whatever extent sinking low or subsiding or being humble we proceed or we conduct ourselves, to that extent there is goodness, benefit or virtue. Bhagavan expresses this in a very forceful manner in Tamil. Evvaḷavukkevvaḷavu literally means what extent to what extent, and aḍaṅgum means that extent to that extent. So it's a very strong way, using these two terms at the beginning of either clause of this sentence makes it a very forceful expression. And tāṛndu means sinking down or subsiding or being humble. Naḍakkiṛōmō literally means walking, but it also means proceeding or how we behave. So to the extent that we behave or we conduct ourselves in a humble, subsided, subdued manner, in other words, to the extent that we surrender ourselves, avvaḷavukkevvaḷavu naṉmai-y-uṇḍu. To that extent, there is goodness. Naṉmai literally means goodness. It can also mean it's beneficial, or it can also mean virtue. So, according to Bhagavan, Bhagavan's definition of what is good and what is bad is rising as ego. What is good, to the extent we subside, to that extent it is good. If we subside entirely, if we eradicate ego entirely, that is the supreme good. That is what we have to infer from this sentence. And then in the final sentence he says, maṉattai aḍakki-k-koṇḍirundāl, eṅgē eṛundālum, irukkalām. Maṉattai aḍakki-k-koṇḍirundāl means if one is continuously restraining, curbing, subduing or reducing the mind. That is, if we're keeping the mind constantly in check. In other words, if we are restraining the rising of ego, of ourself as ego, eṅgē eṛundālum, wherever one may be, irukkalām can either mean one may be, or it can also mean let one be. So Bhagavan is saying, let one. How we should be is by constantly curbing the rising of mind. How do we curb the rising of mind? By mind here he means ego. Ego rises by attending to things other than itself. And its desires and attachments drive it to go out. To the extent that we keep the ego in check by turning our attention within, by surrendering ourselves to that, if we are able to keep our mind constantly subdued, we can be anywhere. Wherever we may be, we may be. So Bhagavan is saying, outside life doesn't matter at all. All that really matters is keeping this ego in check. And if we continue this practice of constantly turning our attention within, constantly turning our attention away from other things, back towards ourselves, eventually ego will be dissolved entirely. And what happens then? Aḍaṅgiṇāl, sakalam-um. When oneself subsides, everything, or when oneself ceases, everything ceases. So when we cease rising as ego, then only there's a state of free of all problems, free of all phenomena, the state of eternal peace, which is what we are even now. Even now we are that, we are nothing but infinite happiness, infinite peace. But that infinite peace and happiness seems to be disturbed because we seem to have risen as ego by seeming to attend to things other than ourselves. And we attend to things other than ourselves because we think we get happiness from those things. Bhagavan says happiness lies only within us. That's how he begins by emphasizing that in the very first sentence of Nāṉ Ār. So it's because we think that happiness lies outside, but we're constantly attending to other things, seeking to experience this or that. But Bhagavan said there's no, in the 14th paragraph, he said there's no happiness in any of the things of the world. Happiness is our own real nature. There's no happiness other than ourselves. So the happiness we are seeking outside ourselves is actually within ourselves. It is actually it is our real nature. So the whole message of Nāṉ Ār from beginning to end is stop attending to anything, stop looking away from ourselves, stop attending to anything other than ourselves, turn our attention within. That is Bhagavan's whole, the essence of Bhagavan's whole teaching. Because when we attend to anything other than ourselves, we rise as ego, all this appears. When we turn our attention back towards ourselves, ego subsides, everything subsides along with it, and what remains then is what always exists, which is, as he says in verse 27 of Upadesha, when one knows what one's real nature is, then Anadi, Ananta, Akhanda, Satchidananda. Anadi means beginningless. Ananta means endless, limitless, infinite. Akhanda means unbroken, undivided, indivisible. Satchidananda. Sat is being, or what is. Chit is awareness, pure awareness. And Ananda is happiness. So if we know what we actually are, all that actually exists, all that we actually are is just beginningless, endless, infinite, indivisible, Satchidananda. So all problems arise only because we have arisen as ego. Cease rising as ego, all problems cease. So Bhagavan's teachings are incredibly simple. It's easy for us to understand. I mean, it's simple logic, but other things appear because we have appeared as ego. And therefore, if we cease appearing as ego, other things will cease appearing. But though it's very, very simple to understand, for most of us, it's very, very difficult to accept. But why it's difficult to accept? Because we don't want to give up our belief in the existence of the external world. Because we think we have so many desires and attachments for these things. But Bhagavan says in one verse in Guru-vaccha-k-koṇḍirundāl, people, and he's referring to all of us, who try to foist reality upon the world are like an infatuated lover who tries to foist chastity on a prostitute. Bhagavan can be quite blunt sometimes. So why we take this world to be real? Because we want it to be real. Because we believe that we're getting happiness from these things. Why the infatuated lover believes that the prostitute is chaste? Because he wants to believe that. So the choice is ours. Bhagavan never says this is what you have to do. If you want to be happy, this is the thing to do. If you want to continue projecting the world, you continue. Because Bhagavan allows us a very, very long rope. Because he knows sooner or later we'll get tired of this. In the final verse of Arunachala-ashtakam, Bhagavan says very beautifully, like the rain evaporated from the ocean and rises as cloud will not stop until it returns to the ocean. However many obstacles come in its way, it may rain on the hill and it may flow down the hill into a lake and again evaporate and go round and round. Eventually, it will return to the ocean, and until it returns to the ocean, it cannot find rest. And likewise, like a bird flying in the sky, it cannot rest anywhere in the sky. And the only place for it to rest is to return to earth. So likewise, for us to rest, for us to be, for us to rest, the only place is to return to our real nature, to what we actually are. So we will all eventually return. Like the bird cannot continue flying in the sky forever, this ego cannot continue. Sooner or later we get too tired of this. And only when we're completely tired of this, we will be ready to surrender ourselves and to merge back into our source, which is just pure awareness. Somewhere, I can't remember, in talks or Maharshi's Gospel or Day by Day or somewhere, someone asked Bhagavan, I can't even quite remember what the question was. It was, Bhagavan, though we hear your teachings, why do we continue whatever? The question doesn't matter, but Bhagavan simply answered, because you haven't had enough of it yet. So until we've had enough of this, until we're tired of all this endless sequence, one dream after another dream, constantly projecting this world, acting out this part of a person, until we're tired of this whole thing, we will continue doing so. But slowly, slowly, the fact that we're all here is that we're all beginning to realize that we're tired of this, beginning to look for a way back home. And so Bhagavan has brought us to him, has given us his teachings and shown us this is the way back home. This is the way back to where we truly belong. So if you want to be free of all this, if you want to be free of everything, don't rise as ego. If you want to enjoy all these things, okay, continue rising as ego. The choice is yours.
Yeah, Michael, free will is only a theoretical concept.
Sorry?
Free will
Yes.
is only a theoretical concept. In reality, there is something, the higher energy which is controlling the universe. But the trouble is, if we didn't have mind and free will, it will basically kill our initiative. Can you throw some light on this?
What is will? Will is what we want. We all have a will. All our desires and attachments are elements of our will. All vasanas, all our Vishaya vasanas are elements of our will. So we have a will, and our will is free. It's not just so long as there is ego, ego has desires. It is free to desire whatever it wants to desire. There's a lot of confusion about free will, because generally when people talk about free will, they're not talking actually about will, they're talking about the ability to do what we want. So in Western philosophy, or most discussions about free will, but actually what they're discussing is whether we are free to do what we want. That is not freedom of will, that is freedom of action. Our freedom of will, there's no limit on our freedom of will. We can want whatever we want to want. The only limitation on our will is we want many different things. We want many often contradictory things. We want we want to fulfill all our desires and attachments, and we also want to be happy. But according to Bhagavan, true happiness lies in giving up all our desires and attachments. So there's a conflict there. So within our will, there is constant conflict. Our desires are in conflict with each other, which is what spiritual practice is all about. We are trying to wean out the wrong desires, the desires to go outwards, and to strengthen the love to turn within. So the whole of the spiritual path is nothing but a battle within our will. A battle between our love to turn within and surrender ourselves, and our liking to go outwards. So we are free to want to go outwards or want to turn within. The problem is we want to turn within because Bhagavan has told us that happiness lies within us. But we still want to go outwards. So there's this conflict there. How to root out the wrong desires, the means is this path of self-investigation and self-surrender. The more we turn our attention within, the more our desires will be weakened and our love to turn within will increase. So if there wasn't free will, there would be no possibility of any spiritual practice. So there is free will. As far as that's one thing, that is our freedom of willing. That is our Ichcha Swatantra. There's also our Kriya Swatantra, which is what people usually call free will. Kriya Swatantra means freedom to act. Our freedom to act is limited because what we are destined to experience is absolutely determined by prarabdha. So if we are destined to experience a certain thing, we cannot avoid it. If we are not destined to experience something, we cannot experience it even if we want to. So what we can do is constrained by our prarabdha, our destiny. Certain things, certain actions we are made to do by our destiny. For example, supposing it's our destiny to be hit by a car while crossing the road. We'll make the wrong decision, we'll cross at the wrong moment and we'll be hit by that car. That decision was made according to destiny. We cannot avoid that. Will may also be there. We may be in a hurry to get home to have our meal or go to bed or whatever. So we make that. So we think the rash decision is made because of our hastiness. But even if we weren't in a haste, we would still make that wrong decision because it's our destiny. So often the will and the destiny work hand in hand. But sometimes we want to do certain things, but are opposed to our destiny. We can try to do those things. We can want to do them because we've got freedom of will. We can try to do them because we've got limited freedom of action. But we won't be able to do them. Supposing I want to become very rich. I want to become a millionaire. So I work very hard trying this business, that business. I can try as hard as I like. If it's not my destiny to become a millionaire, I'm not going to, my actions are not going to bear fruit. So there's limitation on our freedom of action. There's no limitation on our freedom of will. There's absolute limitation on our freedom to experience because we cannot experience anything but we are not destined to experience. And we cannot avoid experiencing what we are destined to experience. If we want to avoid experiencing what we're destined to experience, there's only one way. In order to experience anything, we have to face outwards. If we turn our attention back towards ourselves, destiny will not affect us. Bhagavan said, prarabdha means destiny. Destiny affects only the outward term mind. It cannot prevent us turning within. So we do, freedom of will is the cornerstone of spiritual practice. The thing is, we've got to rectify our will. But now we want the wrong things. Our desires for things that are undesirable, that is, things that are not good for us, that is called the impurities in the mind. The impurities in the mind are nothing but our desires and attachments for things other than ourselves. So all spiritual practice is aimed at purifying the mind. Because only when we free ourselves from our desires and attachments for other things will we be willing to turn within and surrender ourselves completely. So freedom of will is very, very important. But it's a very misunderstood concept because, as I say, generally when people are talking about free will, they're not talking about freedom of will, they're talking about freedom of action. We can't always do what we want to do. We can to a certain extent, but it's limited. Does that adequately answer your question?
So what we are saying here is willing is not thought.
All thoughts arise out of our will. We don't think any thought that we don't want to think.
So thought appears.
Thought doesn't appear of its own accord. Thoughts appear because we think them. And we think, all thoughts, the seed form of thoughts, Bhagavan said, is what are called vasanas. Vasanas are inclination or liking to think things or to do things or to experience things. That is what gives rise to thoughts.
That is the physical phenomena of manifestation.
Not physical.
I'm just thinking.
Yeah.
So there are two things here. One is appearance of physical phenomena of manifestation.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. And there may be something, when I look into it, there may be a source of it, which I don't know. So whatever tool I have now is the mind, the thinking, the thought.
Right.
Okay. But that thought, how that thought works, I wouldn't say how should it work, no. How that thought works, thought in its essence, because thought is necessary if I want to go from here to here, because there is physical manifestation as a body, okay, I have to survive. So I have to have a shelter, whatever food and everything is necessary. So to think beyond that necessary is absolutely neurotic.
Yes. Well, there are a few points. Firstly, according to Bhagavan, what you call physical manifestation, everything that we take to be physical, according to Bhagavan, it's only mental, it's only thoughts. Bhagavan said that the world is nothing but thoughts. In a dream, we see a world. The world we see in a dream seems to be physical, so long as we're dreaming. But when we wake up, we realize that seemingly physical world was actually just mental. According to Bhagavan, this physical world is likewise just mental. There is no such thing as physical. It's all just mental. So everything is thought. And of all thought, the first thought is the thought I. That thought I is ego. That is the limited self-awareness, I am this body. That is the first thought. Only because we have risen as this ego, this awareness that I am this body, all other thoughts come into existence.
You see, the problem I have found with, I would say, some spiritual teaching is I am the self. The whole thing starts with an assumption, which is a thought. How can you get anywhere if you say I am the self?
What does the self even mean?
Yeah, exactly.
What
does self mean?
No. This English term, the self, there is no such term in Sanskrit or in Tamil. Firstly, there's no definite articles. Secondly, there are no capital letters. The Sanskrit term Atma and the Tamil term Tāṛndu simply means oneself. There's no separate thing, the self. A thing, this chair and itself are one and the same. I and myself are one and the same. You and yourself are one and the same. So self is not a separate thing. Self is just what we are. So to say I am the self has no meaning. It's just saying I'm myself. Well, that's obvious. We all know everyone is self. It's not. It's a tautology. The trouble is, this term Atma has been used from ancient times in Indian philosophy. People tend to reify it. That is why it's always translated as the self, as if it's a thing, something separate from ourselves. Atma simply means ourself, oneself. So Atma is myself. So I am myself, yes. What does that tell me? What am I? That's what we need to find out.
So what if that self is not a separation?
No, there's no separation. I cannot be anything other than myself. So who am I? Now I seem to be this body, but I cannot be this body because this body appears in waking state. In dream, I seem to be some other body.
But There is no way of knowing anything. Because if you say, I know that, who is the knower? Who has got this knowledge?
We are knowledge, we are awareness.
Yeah.
So,
we can say that.
but the problem is not how to know, the problem is what we are knowing the wrong things. We are knowing things other than ourselves. We need to know what we ourselves are. When we know what we ourselves are, all other things will cease. There's nothing else to know.
And that's how mind works, isn't it?
It
wants to know, but then at the same time it creates images.
But yeah, the mind complicates things.
Yeah.
Remove the mind and you have absolute simplicity. What is the simplest of all states? The state of oneness. Where you've got two, you've got complication. What is the truth? Ekam eva advitiyam, one only without a second. That is the fundamental principle of Advaita. So what is that one only without a second? Tattvamasi, you are that. So knowing anything other than yourself, according to Bhagavan, is ignorance. Nānavam jnanam ajnanamam, he says in verse 13 of Ulladu. Knowledge of multiplicity is ignorance. What is true knowledge is only ourself. That is pure awareness, that is true knowledge. All other knowledge arises because we have risen as ego.
But you see, there is no need for knowing all this, isn't it?
There's need to know only one thing. Know yourself and everything is known, because you alone exist.
Because then who is the knower?
Well, you are the knower.
Who is it?
You are the knower and you are what is to be known.
This is what I feel, that it's always going to be a mystery.
It's not a mystery. Are you a mystery?
The of life is always be a mystery, and we will always go on
There is no mystery. Bhagavan,
come to a conclusion, because to come to a conclusion, you must have some assumptions, and they say this is the conclusion, but I'm not conclusion. I don't know what I am. Absolutely don't know.
okay, but know yourself and that is the conclusion. According to Bhagavan, there is no mystery. Bhagavan said it's all an open secret. But trouble is, the truth is ourself. We turn our back on ourselves and look out elsewhere, and we say it's all a mystery. How to explain all of this? This is all the mischief of the mind, mischief of ego, creating multiplicity and thereby creating complication.
What is actually happening at this moment?
Nothing is happening. You are, that is the truth. Happening, all happenings, but that is what Bhagavan says in this paragraph. If oneself arises as ego, everything arises. So all happening arises. Does anything happen in sleep? Nothing. All happenings arise only in waking and dream. Why does it happen? Because we've risen as this ego, this false awareness, I am this person. This person is part of this world, so many things are happening in this world. All happening has come into existence because we have risen as ego. Stop rising as ego and nothing is ever happening.
Is there such thing as a reality? Is there anything to understand really?
Yes. You are real. Understand yourself and you'll understand reality.
You see, we talk about awareness. If I am aware of something, there is something that is aware of something, that is a separation, isn't it? Me and
that is not, according to Bhagavan, awareness of something is not real awareness. Real awareness is pure awareness. Awareness that is not aware of anything other than itself. That is real awareness. That is the awareness we're seeking. That which is aware of things other than itself, that is ego.
So, what is the source of all this?
You are. Tattvamasi.
Okay. All I can say is, I don't know what.
But it's all a matter of, it's all a matter of what we want. If we want to continue roaming in confusion, we will continue roaming in confusion. If we want to know what is true, we alone are the reality. Because that which is real must always be real. It can be real sometimes and not real. What is it that exists always? Only ourself. Because we exist in waking, we exist in dream, and we exist in sleep. In sleep, nothing else exists, only ourself. So we alone know what is real. So if we want to know what is real, we have to know ourselves. It's so simple. But our mind will complicate it endlessly. But the choice is ours. This is where the freedom of will comes in. Do we want to continue experiencing multiplicity and the resulting confusion? Or do we want to be free of confusion by knowing that which ekam-eva advaityam, that which is one alone without a second? That is ourself. Know yourself and all confusion ceases. Know yourself means know what you actually are. Know yourself, even now we know ourselves, but we don't know ourselves as we actually are because we know ourselves as I am Michael. Michael is not what I actually am. Michael appears in waking and dream, he's not there in sleep. So how can I be Michael? So Michael is not the problem. The problem is the I that says I am Michael. So that is what Bhagavan refers to when he says if oneself arises, everything arises. If oneself subsides, everything subsides. So we need to stop rising as ego, stop rising as this false I that is aware of itself as I am this body. When we don't rise as this ego, what remains is what is actually real. That is our pure awareness.
It seems like a paradox, doesn't it?
Yes, we can say it's a paradox, but
it's not at the same time.
Yeah, well, yes, but the thing is, when we think about it, it may seem like a paradox. Why to think about it? Attend to yourself and all thought will cease. So it's all the complications, all created by mind, all created by our rising as ego and looking outwards. When we look outwards, we project all this, and we end up in confusion with paradoxes and all these things. If you want to be free of confusion, free of paradoxes, turn within and be as you are. So simple. If we want it. If we don't want it, then we continue in confusion.
Matt, when I first heard you saying this, the thought that came at that time was like, so at one time everybody thought the world was flat and then they thought the world was round, but in actual fact they're both wrong because it's all a projection of mind.
Exactly.
And that was the first, and then that stopped actually a lot of that questioning,
Yeah.
which has been really helpful, because when that question came to mind, I thought it's a bit like, I think the last time I was here you said about a barber doesn't look at all the hairs that come up. So you just chuck it away. And since then, what's been helpful to me in, I think, helping to turn within, has been when I feel the mind really stickily going out, like going on that snowball effect. I just think, oh, I don't want anything. I don't want anything. I don't want to know anything. I don't want anything. And then it does help. That does help stop the mind going out for me. So I just wanted to share that it has been helpful for me. There's certain things that have been said that when I just sort of say, oh, or even getting into the intellectual side of it, I don't need to know any of this.
According to Bhagavan, all science, all philosophy is nothing but examining the hair that is to be thrown away. The only question that is worth asking is, who am I? There is no other question, because what is worth knowing is only ourselves. We know other things because we don't know what we are. If we know what we are, Bhagavan says in verse 28, there's nothing else to know.
Michael, may I
Thank you for the excerpt and the teaching. So I'm quite taken. It might pick up on the point over here a bit about the paradox, and in my own spiritual practice, this element of the ego, and then everything else arises. So therefore, we are moving in an ego world, yes. In the mind world, yes. So to speak. Yeah?
Yes.
So therefore, the spiritual path is to be aware of this mind world, to be aware of this ego world. Well, please.
Okay.
While I formulate, yeah.
Okay.
So I'm also very interested in physics and protons.
Yeah.
And I'm really quite taken by the fact that a proton holds two possibilities at the same time. It holds the particle and it holds the wave. Within the one, there are the two, which is an expression that you use. But so it has an awareness of the two, but it is the one. So therefore, my assumption is that actually, to have the total awareness that we live in an ego world is the particle. And every now and again we get a taste, we get a glimpse, we get a flavour of the wave. But in fact, we are actually the two. And that is the dilemma of the human condition.
The dilemma of the human condition is ego. Yes. Because we are confusing two things. Now we seem to be this body. This body seems to be ourselves. This body is actually something other than ourselves. So I and body are two separate things, but I'm aware of myself as I am this body.
Yes.
So the truth is not two, the truth is one. One only without a second. All otherness, all things other than ourselves seem to exist only when we rise as ego. If we turn our attention back within, there is no multiplicity, there is only oneness. You said that the spiritual path is to be aware of this ego manifestation or ego world or whatever it is.
Well, because this is a physical body, it has to
eat. Yes, but so long as we are aware of this body, so long as we are aware of anything other than ourselves means other than pure awareness, we are experiencing ourselves as ego.
Yeah, but that is the human condition. Though.
That is the human condition, but are you a human being?
Well, at this period, wherever I find myself on my spiritual journey, my answer would be yes.
You seem to be a human being. Are you a human being when you're asleep?
Well, I fall asleep and I wake up in the morning.
Yes.
And my body has been breathing, my heart's been beating.
You assume.
Well, knowing physiology and studying the limited bit of medicine I have, is that actually the body would not be.
If you're having a dream, and in your dream you fall asleep and you wake up again in the same dream world.
It's a mental construct, though. There is the physicality of that. This energy lives in this body. This is the vehicle. This is the vessel in this life.
Yes, but how?
And then there's mental projection.
Do you agree that the body you experience as yourself in a dream is just a mental projection? It doesn't exist when you're not aware, when you don't experience it as yourself.
Yes.
I mean, when you wake up from a dream, the dream body is no longer, it's not remaining in that dream world. You know, it's all just a mental projection. How can you be sure that this body you're experiencing now is any more physical or any more real than that dream body?
Because, well, it's a level of consciousness that I get glimpses of. It's the wave, and this is the particle. So it's I get glimpses of that wave, I get glimpses of that consciousness, like in a dream state sometimes. Yes. But then I wake up in the morning and here I am in a physical body.
Yes, but how can you be sure that physical body exists when you're not perceiving it?
I don't argue with you that it's not the same consciousness. It's the same consciousness that travels through that whole, those paradigms.
Yeah, but what I ask is, how can you be sure that this physical body exists in your sleep when you're not aware of it?
Well, I trust that my heart beats and I will take that breath in the morning. I don't know, do I?
No. Just if we were having this conversation in a dream, you would be saying, when I fall asleep, my heart continues beating and everything. The body you're referring to is a dream body. So we cannot be sure that anything exists when we are not perceiving it. And according to Bhagavan, nothing exists independent of our perception of it. Yeah. This world, according to Bhagavan, is nothing but a dream.
But is that not the spirit? This is maybe where I started with, but is that not the spiritual path? Is that not what we're all engaged in here, is these kind of questions, these fundamental questions?
Yeah,
so therefore that's the human dilemma, that's the human condition.
Yes, it seems to be a human dilemma because we seem to be a human being. But it's not actually a dilemma for the human being. It's a dilemma for the ego that is aware of itself as I am this human being. Human being is a body with a mind and everything, a bundle of body, mind, will and everything. That makes up a human being. But we seem to be this human being in waking state. In dream also we seem to be a human being. Happens to be a different body, but we still seem to be a human being. In dream we don't seem to be a human being at all. But we're perfectly happy in sleep without being a human being.
Yeah, but I can't remember this argument. I mean, I know that it's written in many books, and I know it comes from teachings, but I can't help but feel this argument about sleeping state and waking state slightly confuses for us humble daytime people. Because that's where it all starts to get a bit like, oh God, that's a bit, you know.
That is precisely the point of this analysis of our experience in the three states, because we assume many things uncritically. What Bhagavan is teaching us is critical thinking, deep critical thinking, questioning our most fundamental assumptions. We all assume that this world is real. This world exists whether we see it or not. This body, when we're asleep, this body continues, heart continues breathing, heart continues beating, breath continues. We assume all these things without any evidence. We think we have evidence. We say, no, I didn't see my body, but my wife who was sleeping beside me, she said my body was still breathing and everything. But your wife who's sleeping beside you, she exists for you in this waking state. She didn't think, not for you in the sleep state. So Bhagavan said, calling on the evidence, calling on the testimony of others to prove that you exist, that the body exists during sleep, is like calling on the testimony of a thief to testify that he's innocent. The others who testify that your body existed, the body and world existed when you were asleep, are part of the world whose existence is in question.
Part of the ego world, part of the mind world, part of this consciousness that we're in. It's all part of the same thing, which is the human condition.
Yes. Yeah. The human condition arises because we mistake ourselves to be a human being. So it's not, the problem, as I say, is not the human condition. The problem is, what is the root of the human condition is the ego condition. But the ego always experiences itself as I am this body, not necessarily a human body. We could experience ourselves as a dog or a pig or a cow or anything, or a fly or something. There was some Taoist philosopher who said he had woken up from a dream. He had dreamt that he was a butterfly. And after waking up from that dream, he wondered whether he is a butterfly dreaming that he's a man, or whether he was a man dreaming he was a butterfly. Yeah, but why we think because we take a human body to be I, we now think we have this human condition. If you took a dog body to be I, the problem would be the dog condition.
I guess in the morning as a dog, though,
not in this dream, but in some other dream you might.
Or in this current life state.
In this current dream state.
Well, yeah, I'm a sleepwalker. Yeah, in this current dream state.
Yes.
This is my condition.
Yes.
Yeah. Just as a dog would have a dog's condition, maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
Or something.
But the problem for both the dog and the human being and the butterfly is this false awareness, I am this body. That is ego. That is the problem. That is what we need to investigate. So who is this I who is aware of itself as I am this human being? That is what we need to know.
It seems that everything is an appearance.
Yes.
But there is something there, maybe, I don't know, is untouched by it.
Sorry?
There is something there which is absolutely untouched by this appearance.
Yes, yes. Because what appears, it appears from something and it disappears into something.
That appearance is also, so to say, within me.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if I am the source of everything, then that appearance is also within me.
Everything.
So if he feels that he has got a body and mind and consciousness, it is also an appearance.
Yeah. Everything that appears in the mind. So in that sense, it's all within you. But everything that appears along with the mind in which it appears. But in sleep, neither the mind nor anything else appears. There is no appearance in sleep.
There is no.
But you are there.
Yeah, in deep sleep, there is no awareness of anything at all. When you wake up, then you know you are there.
In deep sleep, there is awareness, not awareness of anything. That is, you are aware of yourself. You are aware you slept, aren't you?
Yeah, I go to sleep when I'm aware. But in the deep sleep.
No, I'm talking about deep sleep. In deep sleep, how many states do you experience? You experience waking, you experience dream, you experience sleep.
Yeah.
In waking, you're aware of yourself as a person. In sleep, you're aware of yourself as a person. In sleep, you're not aware of anything, but you are aware of your existence. Because how can you know that you slept if you were not aware while you were sleeping?
Well, that's when I wake up. That's when, you see, the whole thing is another dream when I wake up. And then
but what I'm saying is, now you're awake. Now you're dreaming or awake or whatever. Now you're aware not of just. Supposing sleep was a state completely devoid of awareness, we would not be aware of any such state. We would not be aware of any gap between successive states of waking and dream. They would seem to be an unbroken continuity of one state of waking or dream after another. But we're aware that there aren't just these two states. We're aware there's a third state in which we're not aware of anything. How are we aware of that state in which we are not aware of anything if we are not aware in that state? What we are not aware of in sleep is any phenomena. But the pure awareness remains in sleep because pure awareness is what we actually are. When we say I slept, we are aware of our existence in a state in which we were not aware of anything.
Also, the three states are the illusion of time, isn't it? There are no three states.
No, well, yeah, it's an illusion of ego. It's not an illusion of... time is part of that illusion. But time exists only in waking and dream. It doesn't exist in sleep.
Sorry, I've got to end this.
Okay. We're all trying to end it. That's important. If you're able to end it, thank you.
The first sentence says that the world rises when the ego arises and sets when the ego sets.
Yes.
Now, Bhagavan, once somebody asked Bhagavan if he would go on a pilgrimage to the north of India to see the holy places there, and he said, no, I don't want to go there.
Yeah.
I don't want to leave Arunachala.
Yeah.
In any case, people may arrive while I'm away.
Yeah.
I'll be disappointed if I'm not here.
Yeah.
And he said, but in any case, he said, what's the point? He said, I never see anything. In what sense did he mean that?
I think possibly two stories are being conflated there, because I know part of that story is actually after Bhagavan passed away, some people asked Murugan to accompany them on a pilgrimage to Varanasi and other places, and he said, what could I see? You can see all the holy places, he said. He said, I've seen the sun, my eyes have been blinded, I can't see anything else. By seeing the sun, he means he's seen Bhagavan, he's got no eyes for anything else. If Bhagavan had said something like that, yes. Well, it applies to Murugan also. When we see what we actually are, when we see the sun of pure self-awareness, we will be blinded. That is, ego will be dissolved, and in the absence of ego, who is to see anything? Once when Bhagavan was looking out of the window at Arunachala, someone asked Bhagavan, are you seeing God? Bhagavan said, who is seeing anything but God? Yes. So because Bhagavan saw everything as himself. In other words, he saw only himself, he didn't see everything. What we see as everything is what he saw as himself.
Yes, I mean that makes sense. I mean, he clearly did see things very clearly in the mundane world.
When you say he, you're talking about the body, which we take to be Bhagavan. But he said, I am not this body.
Yes. I just fall into that one.
Yeah, because Bhagavan is nothing but pure awareness. We see him as a body, so we said that body answered questions and wrote Nāṉ Ār and all these things. That's it, all true from our perspective. But from his perspective, there is only pure awareness.
Could you say that, I mean, he often said that people only see the moving pictures on the screen, they never actually see the screen. But he presumably saw the screen all the time, nothing but the screen.
He said we always see the screen, we're always seeing only the screen, but because our attention is on the pictures, we overlook the screen. We're always looking at the screen, but because we are more interested in the pictures, we fail to notice the screen. The screen is pure awareness.
Yes. Well, that's what he saw.
That's all he saw.
Yes. Okay.
For him, there were no pictures on the screen, because he saw only the screen. We see only the pictures, so it seems there is no screen.
To quote a certain Pandit, when Bhagavan gave him a good answer like that, the Pandit said, that is a complete answer. Thank you.
Yeah, on that point, I'm not trying to muddy the waters, but there is I guess it's a famous quote because it sounds so strange. That is, I think Bhagavan said something like, the eyes, someone asked him, what about the yāni? The eye. And he said, the eyes of a yāni are like the eyes of a dead goat. They glisten brightly, and but they see nothing.
Right.
Yes. What do you make of that?
I haven't heard that before, but...
that one's in the letters from Ramana Maharshi.
Okay, I've forgotten that. Yeah. But Bhagavan also said, see this radio here. We hear it singing nice music coming from the radio, but if we open it, there's nothing inside, because the music is coming from some other source. Likewise, if you open this body up, there's no one inside. It's coming from some other source. Then when people ask me, then where is it coming from? But when say the answers come from the same source that the questions come from. In other words, they're coming only from yourself. Yes?
Deep sleep.
Yes.
You're in pure awareness.
Yes.
Pure awareness
Yes.
lacks the senses. In other words, it can't interact with anything. In other words, it's the absolute. You're in the absolute. Although you've got a body, it's beyond that. You're in deep sleep.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Well, you haven't got a body in deep sleep.
No, you've left it away. You've left it on the bed, so to speak.
Well, so to speak.
So you are, I am that I am.
Yes.
Deep sleep.
Yes.
So deep sleep can't talk, can't interact, can't taste, can't
No.
feel anything.
Pure awareness is called pure because it's devoid of any content. It is just awareness, not awareness of anything.
So this is why when you come out of deep sleep, you know nothing about it except you feel wonderful.
Yeah. Well, we do know something about sleep. We know I slept. We know I slept.
Yes.
But we can ignore the slept part because that's only from the perspective of ego. We know I was there in sleep.
But the ego was not in deep sleep.
Ego was not, but we were.
Nothing was in deep sleep except that you were in the absolute.
You were the absolute.
I was that I am.
Yes.
I am that I am.
Yes, exactly.
Right, so you come out of deep sleep and you then have a body and you have an ego.
But the difference between deep sleep and the waking state is deep sleep there is just I am. In waking, we're aware of ourselves not just as I am, but as I am Mary or I am Michael.
Absolutely, plus ego.
Not plus ego. Ego is that combination, that awareness I am Mary, that is ego.
Yes.
But in that ego, there are two elements.
Yes, duality.
Yes, but there are two elements there. One, Mary, is completely unreal.
Yes.
What is real in ego is the I am. So drop the upadhyaya, drop the adjunct Mary, what remains is pure awareness.
So within the ego there is an element of I am that I am.
Yes.
All right.
Not an element, but it's a whole of that. But that is indivisible.
Right. So within that,
Yes.
there is this fraud, so to speak.
Yes.
It needs to be there because it can't interact with what is, with the play, so to speak. Because if I was pure, I have no taste, I have no senses.
And then there is no play.
Absolutely.
The play comes into existence along with the player. The player is ego.
Right. And the knack is to expose the ego. And once it's exposed, you become the absolute again.
Yes, but what exactly do you mean by expose?
Find out that he's a fraud.
We can never find out what the ego can never find out that it's a fraud. When ego sees what it actually is, there is never any such thing.
Right, so it's the ego detecting the ego.
When you see a snake lying on the ground, it seems to you to be a snake. So long as you don't look at it carefully enough, it continues deceiving you. Continues to seem to be a snake. If you look at it very carefully, what happens to the snake? When you see it carefully enough to see that it's only a rope, it's not that the snake disappears. We can say the snake disappears, but actually what you see then is there never was a snake.
Okay, so what element understands that they're dealing with an element of fraud, that the ego doesn't exist. What recognizes that the ego doesn't exist? Who does?
Well, okay, we're up against problems of language here. When we talk about recognizing the non-existence of ego, there is nothing but recognizes the non-existence of ego. What actually is, which is pure awareness, always recognizes that it alone exists.
Yes.
So in recognizing that it alone exists, it recognizes the non-existence of everything else, we can say.
So it's
But even that is a limitation of language.
Right. It's a self. It's the light revealing itself to itself.
Even let's take the example of sleep. We can say now, but in sleep we were aware of the absence of any phenomena. But saying we were aware of the absence of any phenomena is not actually expressing it quite correctly. Because to be aware of the absence of phenomena, we have to have the idea of phenomena, they're absent. In sleep, what we are aware of is that we alone exist.
In deep sleep?
In deep sleep, I'm talking about. We are aware, but we alone exist. That is equivalent to being aware of the absence of phenomena. In the language of our waking state, we interpret that as awareness of the absence of phenomena. But actually, in deep sleep, there is no such thing as absence of phenomena because there never was any presence of phenomena.
So it's that recognition that that is the true state.
Yes, but recognition means what? The recognition. But for the pure awareness, there is no recognition, because the only pure awareness is pure cognition. It never comes and it never goes. So there's no need for recognition.
Right, so it was never tarnished.
It was never tarnished. There never was any ego.
So, gosh, how do you get at it then?
You, ego, can never get at it. What you can do, turn your attention within, see what you actually are. You will see that you were never ego, there never was world, there never was anything.
So it is, in essence, the absolute waking up.
No, because the absolute never went to sleep. But what is sleeping is only ego. When ego looks at itself and sees what it actually is, it sees that there is only waking, there never was any sleep. Never was any ego, never was any world, never was any dream.
So it's ego demolishing the ego?
Yes.
Ah, right, so that's difficult.
But how does ego demolish itself? By seeing what it actually is. When it sees what it actually is, well, it never sees what it actually is, because as soon as we see what we actually are, we see that we never were ego.
Right, okay. So really it's the active part is the ego with the ego, so to speak.
Yeah.
Because the other aspect is I am that I am. It never was tarnished, it never will be tarnished.
Yeah, it always is as it is.
Got it.
It's immutable. It never undergoes any kind of change whatsoever.
Right.
And that is what we actually are.
So really you're looking the ego to the ego, really.
Ego has to look at itself, but that is like the snake looking at itself. When the snake looks at itself carefully enough, it sees it's just a rope.
Right.
But who sees it's a rope? The rope was always aware that it was a rope, and the rope never mistook itself to be a snake. So now we are talking, when we are trying to express these things, we are talking about things that are actually beyond the mind. Our language is inadequate for this.
Right, okay, got it. Thank you.
Yes, can I say, sorry, can I say there is no cognition in absolute because there is nothing there to cognize with?
It depends what, again, it's a This is again language problem. What do we mean by the term? If by cognition we mean awareness, there is awareness, but not awareness of anything. Pure awareness is not aware of anything other than itself. And being aware of oneself is not an object of awareness. So it is just awareness.
Which doesn't recognize itself because it is what it is.
It is pure cognition, so there's no need for recognition.
Mike, can I just ask you a practical question? It does link some of the stuff we're talking about. So, I mean, I'll talk from a personal experience. I mean, experience and words don't quite cover it, as you say. But if one was to, for argument's sake, be very quiet and still, effortlessly still, I think most of the room get glimpses of what that feels like. It might not be for very long, but you know, there appears to be, again, words don't quite cover it, but passages of time, I know it's beyond time, where there's nothing, there's no thinking, there's no, it's just peaceful. And it's very seductive, actually, I think. Now, after a short while, most of us, including me, well, I'll speak for myself, you kind of clamor on that and notice that as an experience. And then you're thinking, well, if it's coming and going, it's not the real, because it's coming and going. But nevertheless, is it enough from a practical point of view to just remain quiet, still, not wanting anything, not desiring anything, not wanting to figure it out, just literally like that, and stay with that isn't the right way of doing it. You know what I mean? Just being that.
I understand what you mean. Firstly, the quietness you're talking about is not absolute quietness, it's a relative quietness. That's the first point. The second point is there are spiritual practices, or so-called spiritual practices, where you can bring the mind to a state of stillness. By pranayama and other yoga practices, you can bring the mind to a state of stillness. But that state of stillness is manolaya. That is, it is a temporary dissolution of the mind, like sleep. It's no different to sleep in essence. That is not the solution. Two things are required. That the ego comes into existence by attending to things other than itself. So in order to dissolve ego, we need to cease attending to other things. But merely ceasing to attend to other things is not the solution, because when we fall asleep, we cease attending to other things. We need to not only cease attending to other things, we need to be attentively aware of ourselves. We're always aware of ourselves, but generally we are negligently aware of ourselves because we're so interested in other things. So we need to be not just self-aware as we always are, we need to be attentively self-aware. The attentiveness needs to be very, very keen in order to see what we actually are. When we fall asleep, why we fall asleep is because of tiredness. Because of tiredness, ego can no longer continue rising, it subsides back into its source. Once ego has subsided back into its source, what remains is pure awareness. So what we experience in sleep is pure awareness. But that pure awareness doesn't destroy ego, because ego is not there, it's already subsided. So in the waking state, we need to experience that pure awareness. That is, we as ego need to try to experience that pure awareness, which we can do only by attending to ourselves. When ego attends to itself so keenly that it sees what it actually is, it's no longer ego. That is how the dissolution, that is the difference between manolaya and manonasa. Any type of dissolution of mind that is brought, dissolution of mind that is brought about by any means other than keen self-attentiveness is manolaya. Whether it's because of tiredness, as in sleep, whether it's because of anesthesia, as in when you're having an operation, whether it's because you get a bang on the head and you're unconscious, or whether it's because you do pranayama and you get into a state of so-called kevala nirvikalpa samadhi, which sounds very grand, but is actually just a state like sleep. All those are manolaya, because they're brought about by some means other than self-attentiveness. To destroy the mind, if we attend to ourselves so keenly, but we see what we actually are, ego is thereby dissolved. So as ego, we can never see what we actually are. But as ego, we can try to see what we actually are. And in the process of trying to see what we actually are, we destroy ourselves. We bring about our permanent dissolution. That is manonasa. Is the distinction clear, or?
It is. I completely understand the temporary nature of the first one that you're speaking about. You know, we wake up, you know, you come out to an experience, whatever. And yet, the permanent dissolution of the mind, I would imagine would feel, and this is just the mind working again, the mind would imagine it's just that peaceful state. And I'm saying a peaceful state. There's nothing wanting anything. It's a happy state. Yes. And it might just be an ego state, the first one that you spoke.
But unlike the peaceful state you were talking about earlier, it is eternal. It has no beginning, no end. It is infinite peace. Whereas the peace we experience, the relative peace you were talking about, that is can be a beneficial condition, but we have to make use of it by turning our attention back towards ourselves. Otherwise, mere calmness of mind will not bring about its dissolution.
It's like the forest analogy you've used before, Michael. When you get to being able to drop things so you are being more self-attentive, you start moving that lens round and you start getting the rewards rather than settling for that and thinking, oh yes, I feel nice. You have to keep going further into the forest. I think that was one analogy.
Go deeper within.
It's been helpful. It was helpful to me.
And the way to do that, as you say, if I understand it correctly, is you maintain that self-attentiveness with razor sharp.
But
not all the
but as you say, razor sharp. That is the crucial thing. Our self-attentiveness has to be very, very. Bhagavan in Ulludunapti, he used two terms. One is naṉmai-y. Mati literally means mind or intellect, but it means, in that context, it means that power of attentiveness. Naṉ means very, very subtle. So very subtle, and in another place he uses the term koṇḍirundāl. That means by very sharp or very keen power of attention. So how do we sharpen our power of attention to make it subtle enough to see what we actually are? It is by the practice. By constantly trying to turn within, we are slowly refining our power of attention. Now our power of attention is very gross, because we're always using it to attend to things other than ourselves. So it lacks Bhagavan says, in one place he uses an analogy of trying to separate the threads of a fine silk cloth with a blunt crowbar. It's like that. Our power of attention is so blunt now. But by constant practice, we are refining it, we are sharpening it, making it more and more subtle. And when it becomes subtle enough, we will then be able to see ourselves in isolation from everything else. Now when we try to attend to ourselves, we do attend to ourselves, but only partially, because there's still some subtle awareness of other things. So we need to attend to ourselves so keenly, but we are not aware of anything other than ourselves. That requires an extremely sharp and subtle power of attention. To cultivate that subtle power of attention, we need to constantly be trying to attend to ourselves. The more we try to attend to ourselves, the subtler and sharper our power of attention becomes. That is, in terms of another analogy, that is, at first we can only turn 10 degrees or 20 degrees. But as our power of attention becomes sharper and subtler, we're turning more and more degrees, because we are focusing more on the pure self-awareness and thereby excluding other things.
And that's where sticking with the sense of I am is important. Just that.
Yeah, that sense of I am is what? It's self-awareness. It's what we actually are. We're nothing other than that. But now that is all mixed up. Now I cannot distinguish I am from this body, because this body is what I seem to be. So I need a very, very subtle power of attention, power of discrimination, power of distinguishing one thing from another. For that, we need to be constantly trying to attend to I. The more we attend to I, the sharper our power of attention will become. And people sometimes talk about progress on the path. We cannot measure our progress, but people say, after you've been practicing this for 40 years, what have you achieved? Well, in a sense, nothing. But we can see a difference. We can see, but that is the clarity of self-awareness in some way that we cannot express in words or cannot even conceive. Somehow the clarity of self-awareness, it becomes clearer and clearer. When we try to attend to ourselves, it's much clearer what we are attending to. People often have difficulty when they're first talked about self-attention. They say, what do I attend to? Because they're so used to attending to objects, even to understand intellectually that we can attend to the basic self-awareness is very difficult. But the more we practice it, the clearer the way becomes.
I think towards that end, I think dropping vasanas, developing detachment or vairagya, I think help to sharpen.
But it's all part of the same thing. What makes our power of attention blunt is our desires and attachments for other things. But, yeah, because we're unwilling to turn within. So the more our mind is freed of desires and attachment, that's like removing the rust from the thing, and we get closer and closer to that sharp point. So it's all different ways of describing the same process. But eliminating vasanas is absolutely essential, because vasanas are what draw our mind outwards. But vasanas are not things that... Vasanas have no existence apart from ourselves. It's we who have desire to attend to other things. So our will is nothing... People say, oh, my vasanas are causing me so much trouble. As if vasanas are something other than ourselves. It's our own desires.
So in a way, turning inwards can simultaneously get rid of the vasanas as well. It can work both ways. I mean, I see what you mean. It's kind of
this is the most effective way to get rid of vasanas. But the vasanas we want to get rid of are Vishaya vasanas. Vasana means an inclination, a propensity. Vishaya means a phenomena. So it's our inclination to be aware of phenomena, our liking to be aware of phenomena are Vishaya vasanas. They are the problem. The more we turn towards ourselves, at every moment in our life, we have a choice. Either we attend to other things or we attend to ourselves. Usually we're choosing to attend to other things. But every moment we choose to attend to ourselves, we are weakening our desire to attend to other things and increasing our love to attend to ourselves.
And Michael, the peace or happiness that is talked about of the self,
yes,
it's quite subtle as compared to the joy of eating a chocolate or...
Yeah, it is. But it all comes from the same source. Even the joy of eating a chocolate, yes. Bhagavan said that happiness is coming from within you. So it's all coming from the same source. But obviously the pleasure we get from sensual enjoyments is very gross compared to the subtle... the subtle sense of peace,
So initially I felt like I'm getting depressed. Because, I'm no longer able to jump up and down. So
yes.
So is this natural? I mean, is it...
Yes, but it's not depressed. It's actually... every time we jump up, we are suffering. So the calmer we are, the more, and calmness isn't just about sitting 20 minutes in meditation, my mind was calm. Calmness should continue throughout the day. Calmness should continue when all the troubles, sometimes life throws so many troubles at it, but calmness should continue even then. Even if we're in the midst of a battlefield, we should be calm. That's the type of calmness we're aiming for.
In that context, sometimes people can blame us for being insensitive as well, isn't it? Like you're not reacting so much to things.
Yes, but yeah, possibly. But actually, the more the mind becomes refined and subtle, the more selfishness drops down. The more we will empathize with other people. So actually, the kindest of all people, if we call him a person, is Bhagavan. He was so kind, but when he disturbed the hornet's nest, he felt sorry for the hornet, so he left his thigh there and let them sting his thigh. And they didn't sting him anywhere else, only on his thigh, because it was the thigh which... So he's so kind, but he felt sorry for the hornets whom he disturbed. So that is the ultimate kindness. Why? Because there's no ego there.
So a distinction needs to be made between being sensitive and being loud.
Yeah. There are people who are do-gooders. They make a big show of all the good. I'm a philanthropist. I've given so many billions in charity. That is not true. The true compassion is when you see someone suffering and you feel it, when you really, really feel it. Compassion means suffering with, literally.
Is it possible to be attentive to anything other than yourself without desire? So the example is you interact with the appearance every day.
Yes.
And so there's an element of attentiveness in that sense, because you see things coming through your senses, but doing that without a desire would that be a practical way forward?
Why do we attend to these other, whatever day-to-day things, why do we attend to these things?
You have a job.
Why do you have a job? Ultimately, it's all desire. Desire is behind it all. Because we want to preserve our life in this body, we do all these activities, and we think it's all necessary. Bhagavan has said, all these, whatever actions are necessary for to experience your prarabdha, you'll be made to do. But such actions don't require any attention. So if you attend only to yourself, to nothing else, the body and mind may, you wouldn't be aware of it if you're really attending only to yourself. But the actions can go on. So slowly, we have to separate ourselves, not only from the actions, from the doer of the actions. Who is the doer of the actions? The body, speech, and mind. Because we identify with these instruments, we say, I am doing, I am sitting, I am talking, I am hearing.
I think you mentioned it well, that the actions can carry on, but you're still attending to yourself.
Yes.
So maybe I was trying to differentiate. Being attentive to yourself does not necessarily mean that the actions don't carry on.
No, the actions can carry on, but you have no interest in them. It's all a matter of interest. Interest is what you desire. So what are we interested in? If we were so interested in knowing ourselves as we are in knowing other things, we would attend only to ourselves and not to other things. But because we've got more interest in knowing other things than in knowing ourselves, so we are attending to other things. So slowly, we've got to wean our mind away from its interest in anything other than ourself.
Thank you. So, Michael, why did this mess happen in the first place? I mean, couldn't we just have been in the self and not have to go through all? It seems like a futile exercise. You come out, we do all this nonsense, then we go back.
Not even Bhagavan can answer that question. When people asked Bhagavan that question, he gave a very evasive answer. He said, first see if you've risen as ego. And if you can catch that ego, bring him to me, then we can try and explain it.
I think what you were saying earlier, that this is the problem. Like,
yeah.
You can't really say anything has happened once you realize that.
But why or how are the wrong question. The right question is, who or what am I? Because when you see what you actually are, there's nothing that needs any explanation, because it's always been as it is, or you've always been as you are. There's nothing else to...
Is the ego trying to understand something?
It's the ego trying to, yeah. The ego will always take the interest in things other than the pure awareness that it actually is.
So in that sense, even deep spiritual questions can be traps, like for the ego.
Yeah. That's why Bhagavan has... A certain amount of philosophy is necessary, because we need philosophy to understand why we cannot be this body. Because we can't even begin this practice of self-investigation until we understand. First, we need to understand what we're not before we can before we can begin attending to what we actually are. So long as we think we have a body or a mind or a will or the emotions or anything, we're attending to something other than ourselves. So we first need a certain amount of philosophy. But Bhagavan has simplified philosophy. Bhagavan's philosophy is the simplest philosophy in the world. The first two sentences here. If oneself rises, everything rises. If oneself subsides, everything subsides. That's Bhagavan's philosophy in a nutshell. How does myself arise? By attending to other things. How do I subside? By attending to myself. That is all of Bhagavan's philosophy in a nutshell. What can be a simpler philosophy than that?
Can you talk a little bit about attending to yourself when day to day you may have a job which involves a lot of thinking?
Yes, thinking is an action of the mind. Let the thinking go on. Why should it concern you? If you're so eager to know yourself, you will not be interested in the thoughts. Let the thoughts continue if they have to continue. You attend to yourself. So it's all a matter of interest. What are you interested in?
That attention to yourself is also a desire and also a thought.
Yes, but generally, I mean, generally when we talk about desire, we're talking about desire for something other than ourselves. So more appropriate than saying it's a desire for ourselves is more appropriate to say it's love for ourselves. But the words don't matter. It's just that in a sense, yes, it is desire for oneself. But that desire for oneself, that is our real nature. Our real nature is pure self-love. Why do we love ourselves? Because we are supreme happiness, infinite happiness. So we cannot but love ourselves. Even a person committing suicide, why do they commit suicide? Because they love themselves so much. What are they killing? They're killing the body because they think the body is causing them suffering. They want to be free of the suffering. So self-love is what drives all our actions. Even the greatest self-sacrifice, a soldier who lays down his life for his comrades, there's someone who gives up all their wealth to serve the poor or whatever sacrifice we make, it's all for the sake of ourself, because we are happy to do that. The story of Abraham Lincoln going into a muddy pit to help a pig out. Why he did it? He said because he couldn't bear to see the pig suffering.
Not for the sake of the pig, for himself. Because he was suffering.
Yeah, but he couldn't bear it, so he was doing it for himself. So ultimately everything is driven by self-love. But self-love is not wrong. The problem is we take ourselves to be something other than what we are. So we have love for this body, love for this mind, love for this person.
Is self-inquiry is self-love?
Yeah, yes. Well, all our actions are driven by self-love, but it's misguided self-love. Whereas self-investigation is a wise application of our self-love.
So my practical question then is, if you're focusing on self-inquiry all the time,
yeah,
can you practice self-inquiry and let the thoughts go on for what you need, what you're employed to do?
Let them go on or not. If your interest is in knowing yourself, you'll be unconcerned whether thoughts are going on or not. Bhagavan said, let them go on or let them not go on. What's it to us? That's why he says in Nāṉ Ār, he says in the 6th paragraph, he says, however many thoughts arise, what? In Tamil, N means what in the sense of so what, or what does it matter? What does it matter however many thoughts come? As and when any thought arises, if one turns one's attention, if one investigates to whom has it risen, to me, who am I, the mind will then subside. And the thought which arose will subside, and the mind itself will subside back into its source.
The thought that has to, in a way, not has to, but goes on, is the thought related to your work.
Yeah.
That can't subside in the sense that that has to go on. Like, say, for example, you're employed to do calculations.
Yeah.
So you add numbers up every
Yeah.
day. So that carries on. That you cannot subside.
We have that is what your body, speech, and mind are destined to do. They will be made to do. So if it's your destiny to sit there adding up figures, when I say you, that means your body and mind will sit there adding up figures. But if your interest is in attending only to yourself, you will not be aware of that. If you're not aware of it, it's not actually happening.
Okay.
So the only way to avoid prarabdha, to avoid destiny, is to attend only to ourselves. So long as our attention is facing outwards, we have to experience what we are destined to experience.
Other one also say in this connection that if you're sort of engaged in intellectual work, and I had this problem when I was a lawyer, you had to concentrate and think very hard all the time. So how could you be thinking about the self while you're doing that? The answer is you can't. But what you can do is keep the quest for the self in the background and keep coming back to it when there are intervals. Like monkeys who seem to be sort of larking about all the time, but they're actually focused on getting the food, their food all the time. That's their main object. So they may sort of lark about and seem to be fooling about, but they're actually concentrated on getting their food. In the same way one can sort of add up sums and things as you have to do, but keep this overwhelming question in the background and keep coming back to it. I think that's what comes.
Well, yes, that is, at first, because of our, because we still have strong desires and attachments, it seems to us that we have to attend to the work but we're destined to do. But actually, Bhagavan says in the 13th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, that's the paragraph which is mainly about surrender, he says, when it is known that the one Parameshwara Shakti is driving all karyas means everything that is meant to happen will be made to happen, why should we, instead of yielding ourselves to it, why should we be thinking it's necessary to do this, it's necessary to do that? Just like the passenger on the train, he then gives that analogy. When knowing that the train is carrying all the burden, why should we who travel on it carry our little luggage on our head instead of putting it aside and traveling happily at ease? So what Bhagavan implies there is, though it may seem to us that we need to attend to our sums or to our legal papers or whatever it is, it may seem like that at first, but as we go deeper and deeper into this path, we will find that we can attend to ourselves and that work will get done by itself without even your attending to it.
Well, I think it's part of ourselves have to attend to it. I mean, you have to add up the sums.
That's a work of your mind.
Well, yes.
But not you. Why should you? So that is the whole point of this self-investigation. We are separating ourselves. We are isolating ourselves from these adjuncts. Body, speech, mind, will, all these things. These are all adjuncts. They're things that are added to us. They're not with us in sleep. Okay. They come to us in. So these, when we attend to ourselves, we are separating ourselves from these things. And if we attend to ourselves keenly enough, everything else disappears. But we don't attend to ourselves keenly enough in practice. So in practice, for most of us, yes, a certain amount of attention does continue on the work. But the more we follow this path, the more we go deep in this practice, the more we will find all these things are happening. We don't have to take... People driving cars, they drive through the busy streets of London. They're not, most of the time they're not... They're not even aware. They may be talking or they may be thinking about problems at home or problems in the office or things. Things go on autopilot. Like that, all our work can go on autopilot. If we attend only to ourselves. So actually it's not necessary to attend to your sums or to your legal papers or anything. For legal cases your body, speech and mind are destined to deal with, they will deal with. Your concern is only to attend to yourself.